You wake up, look in the mirror, and wonder why you feel invisible to the people around you. In conversations, you feel like your words carry no weight, your presence leaves no mark, like you could walk out of the room and no one would notice. Maybe you try to compensate by being extra nice, agreeing with everything, offering favors no one asked for. But the more you try to please, the more you realize you just become convenient, never truly important to anyone. At night, when you're alone, you ask yourself what's wrong. Why do other people seem to effortlessly magnetize attention and affection, while you, even trying so hard, remain on the fringes of relationships, always present but never essential? You know that feeling of being treated as optional, of sensing people tolerate your company but don't seek it out, of realizing you invest emotionally in connections that never deepen because you don't know how to make your existence meaningful to the other. And the most painful part is when you start to believe there's something fundamentally lacking in you, that you just don't possess that indefinable quality that makes certain people shine in the eyes of others, that attracts genuine respect, true admiration, that kind of love that doesn't need to be begged for but is offered freely because the person has become irreplaceable. But what you might not know is that Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived the horrors of Auschwitz and founded an entire school of thought on the meaning of human existence, discovered something profoundly liberating about this very question. He realized, both in the most extreme circumstances of the concentration camps and in decades of clinical practice, that the ability to be truly irresistible to other human beings has nothing to do with seduction techniques, social manipulation, or superficial self-improvement. Frankl identified specific existential attitudes that radically transform how a person is perceived and valued, not because they are trying to impress, but because they have become someone who embodies qualities that touch the deepest dimension of human existence. These aren't strategies to appear interesting. They are transformations of being that make you someone whose absence would be felt as a real loss, someone whose presence adds meaning to others' lives, someone people not only want around but need, because you offer something no one else can offer, in quite the same way. The first attitude Frankl identified as fundamentally magnetic is what he called self-transcendence, the capacity to genuinely direct your attention and energy beyond yourself, not as a performance or strategy, but as a basic orientation of existence. In the concentration camps, Frankl observed that the prisoners who maintained the ability to care about others, who could still offer their last slice of bread to a weaker comrade, who were genuinely interested in the suffering of others even amidst their own horror, were those around whom others naturally gravitated. These people weren't popular because they tried to please. They were deeply valued because their presence represented an affirmation of human dignity, a reminder that even there, in hell, it was still possible to live for something greater than immediate self-survival. What makes this attitude so irresistible isn't performative altruism or calculated kindness to gain approval, but the fact that when you genuinely live oriented toward missions, causes, people, or creations that transcend your own immediate self-interest, you become someone through whom others can access meaning. Your presence stops being about you and becomes about something larger, and people are magnetically drawn to those who connect them with transcendent dimensions of existence. Frankl saw this clearly in his clinical practice. Patients who lived self-centered, obsessed with their own happiness, appearance, or success, invariably complained of superficial and empty relationships, while those who found a mission or cause to live for, even if less socially adept, developed deep and loyal connections because they offered those around them a shared sense of purpose. When you ask yourself every morning, what is life asking of me today? Instead of, what can I gain today? And when you truly listen to another not to formulate your next response, but because you genuinely want to understand their existential universe, when you care about projects, ideas, or people with an intensity that goes beyond the benefit they bring you, something radically shifts in how people perceive you. You stop being someone who is always taking from the world, always evaluating what's in it for me, and become someone who adds, who contributes, who makes life around them richer simply by being present and engaged with something that matters. The second attitude Frankl identified was what he called self-distancing, the uniquely human capacity to observe yourself with humor, irony, and perspective, without taking yourself so deadly seriously that you become a prisoner of your own self-image. Frankl noted that the most attractive and magnetic people had developed this ability to laugh at their own contradictions, to acknowledge their limitations without crumbling, to maintain a lightness even in the face of their own insecurities and failures. This isn't neurotic self-deprecation or making fun of yourself to gain sympathy. It's something much deeper. It's the inner freedom that comes from not being completely identified with your own image, with your achievements or failures, with what others think of you. In the concentration camps, where everything that defined social identity had been stripped away, Frankl observed that some prisoners managed to maintain this inner distance, could find absurdities even in that horror, and these men were sought out by others because their presence offered relief from the psychological prison of total suffering. They proved, simply by existing this way, that the human being is greater than any circumstance, that no situation can completely define who you are if you maintain this capacity to observe yourself from a transcendent perspective. What makes this attitude so irresistible is that when you aren't desperately defending an image of yourself, when you can admit mistakes without falling apart, when you can laugh at your own pretensions, you become incredibly safe to be around. People relax around you because they don't have to walk on eggshells. They don't have to feed your fragile ego. They don't have to be careful not to bruise your delicate self-image. Frankl used self-distancing therapeutically through his paradoxical intention technique, teaching patients with social anxiety to humorously exaggerate exactly what they feared, and found that when they could play with their own anxieties, not only did the symptoms diminish, but they became much more socially attractive because they lost that desperate tension of trying to control how they're perceived. You notice the difference immediately when you meet someone who can tell a story where they're the butt of the joke and genuinely laugh versus someone who's constantly impression managing, always trying to prove something, always defending turf. The first you want to keep around. The second is exhausting because every interaction is a performance where you're the unwilling audience forced to validate. The third attitude Frankl saw as fundamentally magnetic was the ability to find and affirm meaning even in unavoidable suffering, not through denial or toxic positivity, but through courageous honesty about the pain, combined with an existential refusal to let suffering have the last word on the meaning of your life. In the concentration camps, surrounded by people in absolute despair, Frankl observed that those who maintained some framework of meaning, some reason to go on that transcended immediate circumstances, became sources of hope for other prisoners, even when they had nothing material to offer. These people didn't deny the horror, didn't pretend everything was okay, but they refused to let the horror wholly define what that moment meant. A man might be starving, but still find meaning in helping another. A woman might be sick, but still see purpose in preserving her dignity. And these individuals became immensely important to those around them because they proved that meaning isn't dependent on favorable external circumstances. What makes this attitude so irresistible is that we all face unavoidable suffering. We all carry hurts we didn't choose. And being near someone who has transformed their suffering into growth, who has found meaning where others found only bitterness, offers a deeply needed hope that our own suffering can also have purpose. Frankl wasn't talking about people faking it when they're broken. He was talking about people who are radically honest about their pain, but simultaneously refuse to live as permanent victims of their circumstances. When you meet someone who has been through real tragedy and emerged not bitter but deepened, not shut down but more compassionate, not broken but strengthened in their capacity to value what matters, you want that person in your life because they prove it's possible to walk through fire and come out more human on the other side. Frankl used to say that suffering ceases to be suffering the moment it finds meaning, and people who have mastered this existential alchemy carry a gravity and depth that naturally draws others who also seek to live courageously in the face of life's inevitable difficulties. And now I want to pause and really talk to you. I know many of you watching this video feel invisible in your relationships, like your presence doesn't truly matter to anyone, like you could disappear and nobody would truly miss you in a profound way. So tell me here in the comments, with all honesty, have you ever felt like you're treated as optional in people's lives, always replaceable, never essential to someone? If so, simply write, I feel invisible and optional. Nothing more is needed. And know that by doing so, you're helping other people in the comments feel less alone in this pain. Often it's liberating just to see that others go through the exact same thing and are on this same journey of becoming people whose lives carry weight and meaning for others. When you share, you not only validate your own experience, but you show dozens of others that they aren't alone in this quest for genuine, deep connection. Let's build a community of courage and authenticity here. The fourth attitude Frankl identified as immensely attractive was radical existential responsibility, the willingness to fully recognize and own that you are the author of your own life, not in the naive sense that you control everything that happens, but in the profound sense that you can always choose your response to what happens, and that choice defines who you become. In the concentration camps, where almost all external freedom had been stripped away, Frankl found that the last human freedom, the one no circumstance can remove, is the freedom to choose your attitude toward what you are facing. He observed that prisoners who took responsibility for how they responded to the horror, who refused to blame circumstances alone for every thought and action, maintained an inner dignity and strength that others naturally respected and admired. These people didn't deny the brutality of their situation, didn't pretend they had more power than they actually possessed, but they also didn't surrender to the role of a completely powerless victim who just reacts to what's done to them. What makes this attitude so irresistible is that when you're around someone who takes genuine ownership of their life, who isn't constantly blaming circumstances, other people, their childhood, their biology, or the world for every problem they face, you feel you're with someone who can actually change, grow, evolve. People living in constant victim mode are emotionally exhausting because there's never a possible solution. There's always an external reason why nothing can get better. There's always someone or something to blame. Frankl saw this repeatedly in his practice when patients would come complaining about bad relationships, unfulfilling jobs, meaningless lives, and he would gradually guide them to the revolutionary realization that the question wasn't, "Why is life doing this to me?" but rather, "What is life asking me to do with this?" This shift in perspective from victim to author completely transforms how you show up in the world. When you take responsibility, you become someone who can create change, someone worth investing in emotionally. Because you're not stuck in cycles of complaint and blame, you're genuinely trying to build something better. The most magnetic people you know likely share this quality of looking at their lives and saying, "This is mine. I'm responsible for how I respond. I'll make the best of the hand I've been dealt." This stance isn't arrogant or insensitive to real suffering. It's simply a refusal to give up the power you truly possess, the power to give meaning through your choices. The fifth attitude Frankl considered deeply attractive was the ability to see and affirm the unrealized potential in others. It's looking at people not just as they are, but as they could become, treating them according to their highest possibilities rather than their present limitations. Frankl discovered that when you treat someone as if they already are what they have the potential to become, you help them move in that direction. You literally summon the best out of them through your positive expectation and recognition of still dormant capabilities. This isn't naivety or ignoring real problems. It's what Frankl called tragic optimism, the capacity to maintain faith in human potential even while honestly acknowledging present flaws and difficulties. In the concentration camps, he observed that prisoners who could still see dignity and possibility in their degraded companions, who treated even the most broken with respect for the humanity that still existed beneath all the suffering, became figures of hope because they affirmed that a human being is greater than their worst circumstances. What makes this attitude so irresistible is that we all carry unfulfilled versions of ourselves. We all have underdeveloped potentials. And when someone genuinely sees these possibilities in us and treats them as real, we feel a profound gratitude and a natural desire to be near that person because they make us feel like we can become more than we are. Frankl applied this therapeutically, consistently. He never treated patients as mere collections of symptoms or trauma histories. He always looked for and affirmed capacities for growth, possibilities for transformation, the specifically human dimension that can transcend conditioning and choose change. When you develop this ability to see genuine potential in others, not manipulatively to make them feel good, but because you truly believe in the human capacity for transformation, you become someone people seek out. Because you offer something rare and precious. You offer faith in their possibilities, when they themselves may have lost it. Can you recall someone who saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself, who treated you as capable when you felt incompetent, who maintained faith in you when you were ready to give up on yourself? That person likely holds a special place in your memory and heart because they offered something you desperately needed, the affirmation that you are more than your current flaws, that you have undeveloped possibilities, that it's worth investing in who you can become. The sixth, and perhaps most paradoxical, attitude Frankl identified as fundamentally magnetic was the willingness not to depend on others' approval for your sense of value, not to make others' opinions the measure of your own dignity, and to maintain an inner freedom that allows you to be genuine, even when it means being unpopular. Frankl observed that the people most desperately needing external approval were often the least capable of genuinely obtaining it, because their fear of rejection made them false, calculating, incapable of real authenticity. In the concentration camps, those who maintained an inner dignity regardless of what guards or other prisoners thought of them, who refused to compromise essential values even under brutal pressure, were respected even by those who disagreed with them because they demonstrated an integrity that couldn't be broken by external circumstances. What makes this attitude so irresistible is deeply paradoxical. When you don't desperately need people to like you, when you're willing to be authentic, even if it means displeasing some, you become far more attractive to those who value genuine substance over pleasing performance. Frankl used to say that the direct pursuit of happiness or approval invariably fails. These things come as byproducts of living with integrity and purpose, not as direct goals. When you meet someone who clearly isn't selling an image, who isn't constantly adjusting their behavior to maximize approval, who has their own positions and holds them even under social pressure, you feel you're with someone real, someone trustworthy, because you know what you see is what truly exists, not a calculated performance to please. The most magnetic people you know likely share this quality of not needing you to constantly agree with them or approve of them. They are who they are with a quietude that allows you to be authentic around them too, because you're not being judged against impossible standards or pressured to constantly validate their ego. Frankl applied this therapeutically when teaching patients to practice derelaxation, to stop obsessively monitoring how they were being perceived and start genuinely focusing on what they were trying to contribute or create. He found that, paradoxically, the less they worried about being approved of, the more naturally they built solid, respectful relationships. If these ideas are touching something deep within you, if you feel you've finally found someone who understands this quest to become a person whose life has weight and meaning for others, subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore Frankl's thought and that of other humanist philosophers weekly, offering real answers to the existential questions so many of us carry in silence. You don't have to walk alone on this journey of becoming someone truly irresistible, not through superficial techniques, but through depth of being. Click the subscribe button and become part of this community of people brave enough to question, seek, and grow toward their highest human potential. What makes these 6 attitudes so powerfully transformative is that they aren't tricks or techniques you can fake. They are ways of being that emerge from a deep existential transformation in how you relate to your own life and to the lives of others. Frankl insisted that you can't just decide to perform self-transcendence or self-distancing as social manipulation tactics. They need to become part of who you genuinely are through real commitment to growth and meaning. When you try to use these attitudes as techniques to become popular or admired, they fail because people unconsciously perceive the lack of authenticity. They sense you're performing rather than being. But when these attitudes emerge from a genuine orientation of your life towards meaning, when you truly live directed beyond yourself, when you genuinely distance yourself from your self-image with humor, when you honestly find meaning even in suffering, when you take real responsibility for your responses to life, when you see and affirm genuine potential in others, when you maintain integrity, independent of approval, something changes radically and profoundly in your presence. You stop being someone trying to get something from others and become someone who has something real to offer, not something material or superficial, but something that touches the deepest dimension of human existence, the need for meaning, dignity, hope, and authentic connection. People feel this even if they can't articulate exactly what they feel. They just know they want to be around you, that your presence makes their lives feel more significant, that you represent something valuable in a world often empty and superficial. Frankl spent decades observing and documenting what makes certain people magnetically attractive, while others, even desperately trying to please, remain on the periphery and forgettable. His conclusion was revolutionary precisely because it contradicts everything modern culture tells us about attractiveness and social influence. He discovered that you don't become irresistible by focusing on yourself, perfecting your appearance, developing performative charisma, or learning persuasion techniques. You become irresistible by forgetting yourself in the right way, by living for something greater than your own immediate interest, by developing depth of character through honestly facing life's existential challenges, and by offering others not calculated performance, but authentic presence rooted in real values and meaning. The people you consider truly irresistible, those whose absence would be felt as a genuine loss, likely embody these Franklian attitudes even without ever having read Frankl. They've simply discovered through their own journeys that the path to deep connection isn't about trying to impress, but about becoming someone of real substance, someone who lives with purpose, authenticity, courage, and genuine compassion. The question Frankl leaves you with isn't, how can I make people like me? But rather, who do I need to become to offer something of real value to the existence of others? This shift in perspective from obtaining to contributing, from impressing to serving, from performing to being, completely transforms your approach to relationships and social life. When you wake up in the morning thinking, what can I offer today? When you enter conversations genuinely curious about the other person instead of calculating how to be perceived, when you live oriented by values that transcend social approval, when you face your suffering with courage and find opportunity for growth in it, rather than just victimhood, when you take radical responsibility for your choices and responses, when you see and affirm possibilities in others, when you maintain inner integrity even under pressure to conform, you are cultivating exactly the qualities Frankl identified as fundamentally magnetic to other human beings. And the most beautiful part is that these qualities don't just make you more attractive, they make you more fully human. They develop in you capacities unique to our species, differentiating us from other animals and machines, making human existence potentially meaningful and dignified, even amidst all inevitable suffering. So, look at your own life now with honesty and ask yourself where you stand on these 6 attitudes. Are you living oriented beyond yourself, or are you trapped in narcissistic concern with your own image and happiness? Can you laugh at yourself and maintain perspective? Or are you desperately defending a fragile self-image? Do you find meaning even in your suffering, or do you succumb to bitterness and victimhood? Do you take responsibility for your responses to life, or are you constantly blaming circumstances and others? Do you see and affirm potential in others, or do you just criticize and diminish? Do you maintain integrity, or do you sell your authenticity for crumbs of approval? These aren't questions to feel guilty or inadequate about. They are invitations to real growth, opportunities to start cultivating within yourself the attitudes that not only make you irresistible, but make your life genuinely meaningful. And if you commit seriously to this development, if you truly work to embody these attitudes not as techniques, but as a transformation of being, you will discover something wonderful. You will not only attract more deep connections, you will become the kind of person you yourself would want to have around. Someone of real substance, someone whose existence adds value and meaning to the world. Let us know in the comments which of these 6 attitudes you feel you most need to develop in your own life. Your honesty can inspire others on this same journey of becoming truly irresistible through depth of character and authenticity of being.